Anne, in your recent piece, you write what Brexit did to Boris Johnson and Britain. You wrote this in part, quote, Brexit, the solution to the problem Johnson and his supporters described, was based on a series of lies. The electorate was promised that departure from the EU would lead not only to fewer immigrants, but to greater prosperity, more welfare spending, less crowded hospitals. Instead, 6 years after the vote, Britain is less prosperous and more unequal. If British politics were a Faulkner novel, Brexit would be the long-ago tragedy that haunts all of the main characters, even if they hadn't been born when it happened. Johnson's perceived dishonesty is a byproduct of Brexit. The Tories' perceived failure to keep economic promises is a byproduct of Brexit. The flailing economy itself is a partial byproduct of Brexit. Because we are talking about Westminster, not Washington, it's extremely unlikely, indeed unimaginable, that Johnson will somehow stage a coup, encourage a violent march on the House of Commons, or support the public hanging of the Chancellor of the Exchequer. No. But Johnson has already broken many unwritten rules and possibly some written ones.
That stuff only happens here.
As well. And Anne, you know, you have written again, your extraordinary book, you've written about how leaders in Hungary and in Poland had actually made up crises. I've talked time and again about Donald Trump talking about building the wall in 2016 when actually illegal immigration to the United States from Mexico is at a 50-year low. You go through, and once again, here's one more phony populist, an Oxford phony populist. We have our Ivy League phony populist here. Coming up with a solution to a problem that just did not exist. Talk about how that ultimately brought him down.
Yeah, so it's important to acknowledge that Brexit was not the immediate cause of why Boris Johnson's cabinet began resigning, why people were so angry at him. That was because of a series of lies he told, some important and some trivial, that added up over time to a picture of somebody who was dishonest, and also his method of dismissing those lies by laughing or making a joke. I mean, it worked for a while, and then it didn't work at all. But really, in the background of that, as you say, and as I wrote, is this big lie. And the lie was that Brexit was this great advantage for the UK, that it would bring the British more money, that they would get, there was actually a slogan, we will get £350 million a week for our national health care service if we leave the European Union. That was a made-up number. They knew it was a made-up number at the time. Nevertheless, they kept repeating it. And this idea that, oh, if we leave Europe, we'll get, we'll have more money and we'll be better off. And also we'll be able to control our borders better. We'll get some of our sovereignty back. That was a package that was sold to the British. And it was utterly dishonest. Brexit has, of course, created more bureaucracy. It's made it much harder to trade with Europe. It's created a series of complicated political problems in Ireland and with the European Union. It's removed Britain from a lot of important councils. It's really and truly a shame that the UK is not part of the EU's foreign policy making mechanisms anymore. It isn't part of the conversation about Ukraine that's taking place there. And so, they weakened the country, and they made the country poorer, and they made business more difficult, all in the name of some kind of, super plan that was going to help poor people get back at the elites or something like that. And it was made up. And that's what's in the background to a lot of these other scandals. This feeling that Johnson doesn't tell the truth. He didn't tell the truth about that either.
So you've written a good bit about phony populism, about the lies, the sort of fire hose of falsehoods that's polluted Western democracies. I'm wondering, do you see you've also written about Liz Cheney, do you see with the January 6th committee's work in somehow breaking through to the American public with Boris Johnson's departure? Do you see that perhaps this phony populism may, I won't say may be coming to an end, but perhaps maybe has already reached its zenith and may be in decline?
Well, I think it's clear that people who are fighting populism and who are fighting lies, like the January the 6th lie, are getting better at doing it. We understand now that just shouting "you're wrong," or "here's a fact," doesn't change anybody's mind. And what you need to do is present people with a digestible narrative, as the January the 6th committee has done, cutting up the story into segments, doing it slowly over time. Actually, one of the most important things they've done is present the evidence. Almost all of it, 90% of it, 95% of it, is coming from Republicans, and not just Republicans, but people who were close to Donald Trump. And the idea of that is that, listen, you're hearing this story not from, the left and not from Trump's enemies, you're hearing it from Trump's friends. And I think the idea of that is to persuade people that this is a true story, to give them some trust in the people telling the story and the way the story is being told. And that's the way to fight populism, and not as was tried actually during the Brexit campaign in the UK, saying it's not 350 million pounds, it's not true, because that didn't work. You need to present people with a counter narrative and a counter explanation that gives them a sense of reality.
Hey, Ann, good morning. It's Jonathan. We just talked about, Joe mentioned, you're talking a little bit here about Liz Cheney. I was hoping you could dive in a little deeper on the role she's playing and what she represents. She should be noted, at the White House yesterday, actually, as a guest, attending the Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony there. She's also someone who is facing a very stiff primary challenge back in Wyoming, even as there's buzz that she might run for president in 2024. Tell us about her importance right now and what you see her future being, and what that could tell us about these efforts to stand up to this sort of phony populism.
Liz Cheney is going to be remembered as one of the most historically significant figures of this period of time. She's understood the importance of the January the 6th lie, why it's important to stand up to it, and why it's important as a Republican to stand up to it, even if it comes at the cost of losing her seat in Congress, although, of course, we don't know yet whether that will happen. And I think what she's also trying to do is build some kind of possibility of a different Republican Party in the future. So here's what it could look like. Here's what kind of people could be part of it. Remember, it used to be completely normal for Republicans, or Democrats indeed, to go to the White House when somebody of the opposite party was the president, or to attend neutral ceremonies like a Congressional Medal of Honor ceremony. And she's reminding everybody of that normalcy. There used to be bipartisan things that we were all able to do together.